resources that he will share with us. I would like also to thank all the participants of this session for being patient and because it's not easy to be at the first session in the morning and then this afternoon. Voilà, donc à vous, Monsieur Mkari, and thank you for all of you. Thank you, Monsieur Kistier.
D'accord. Une petite seconde. C'est bon, on peut y aller. Bonjour tout le monde.
Bonjour.
Bonjour tout le monde, bienvenue à ce webinaire sur les ressources éducatives libres et les droits d'auteur. I would like to thank Professor Kestier for accepting to participate with us to this webinar. Welcome, Frédéric. Je commencerai tout d'abord par présenter un petit peu notre invité, le professeur Frédéric Kestier, avec qui j'ai travaillé, j'ai eu le plaisir de travailler mais depuis maintenant presque 3 ans sur le projet Marbouk, mais qui est aussi donc connu pour ses travaux justement sur les ressources éducatives libres, tout ce qui est open source. Il est professeur à la Freie Université de Bruxelles. Il est aussi membre du département des sciences d'éducation dans cette même université. Il a participé également à la création de plusieurs projets, notamment Open Partner Office. Il est aussi consultant dans plusieurs projets de TIS. Il est cofondateur et membre dans des groupes de recherche où il est directeur de la recherche et l'innovation, notamment la plateforme Camilo. Il a participé à sa création. Il est aussi chef de département de l'innovation pédagogique et éducative à l'Université libre, Freie Université plutôt de Bruxelles. Il a beaucoup de publications, je ne vais pas vous les citer, mais toutes ces publications sont centrées essentiellement sur ce domaine donc de l'éducation libre, l'open education, etc. Je voudrais donc lui donner la parole pour présenter un petit peu ce qu'il a à dire, et après je prendrai la parole pour parler de l'expérience du Maroc dans le domaine des ressources éducatives libres à travers le projet OpenMed qui a pris fin il y a 2 ans et qui a justement fait bouger les choses dans le domaine des REL, qu'on appellera désormais des REL ou OER en anglais. Donc, Frédéric, tu as la parole. On t'écoute.
Merci. Merci. Bonjour tout le monde. Merci, chers collègues, pour l'invitation and for the introduction. As you hear, I will speak in English. I'm from Belgium, from the Free University of Brussels, but the Flemish one, the Dutch-speaking one. Like the majority of my country, I speak Dutch, Nederlandais. I understand French, so you can ask your questions in French, but speaking hours and hours in French, I will be too slow. So please excuse me for this, first of all. So my slides you can find already on the website of Erasmus Plus from Morocco, but also on SlideShare. I have many presentations there since many years, and that's my excuse to use SlideShare because it's not the most open platform nowadays. But when I started with it, it was rather okay. My slides are, of course, like the topic, openly shared under a free license. I will explain what this means. So let me start with a little bit of copyright history. Why history? That's because the history is important to understand the current situation, and things that happened in the past are similar to what is happening now. You know, before the invention of the printing press, books were copied by hand. That was a very slow process. The good writers could write or copy 2 books per year. And these books were, of course, then very expensive as a farm. And universities didn't have many books. Even famous universities often had only like 100 books. And moreover, this work was, at least in Europe, something which was like a monopoly by the monks, which meant that these people, monks, decided what they liked and not, and what they copied and what not. So the range of books available was very limited. This changed, luckily, with the invention of the printing press in the 15th century. From then on, many books could much faster be reproduced, and many more people were producing books, so there was a much more diverse range of books. So that probably helped to end what we called the Dark Ages in Europe. But not everybody was happy. In Europe, for example, the Catholic Church was not happy that they lost their monopoly, their censorship. And so they were lobbying with the kings to forbid the printing of books. And they succeeded here and there. For example, in France, in 1535, they managed to get a law that was forbidding bookshops. And they had the death penalty for using the printing press. Of course, people like to read, and so this didn't work very well. So even with the death penalty, people were still printing lots of books. And so they increased the penalties, and they did not only instill the death penalty, but they also did torturing. You see here people were broken on the wheel, so they were searching for torturers that have the art to make the people suffer as brutally as possible by breaking all the bones in a slow, painful death. Luckily, I was born afterwards, also after the tradition of the index of forbidden books. So the Catholic Pope, for more than 4 centuries, when they lost the death penalty and bans, they were just producing a list of books which they considered not good. And so on the forbidden list, I was born afterwards, but still, as a kid, I still heard now and then, you should not read that book because it's a bad book, it's forbidden, it's on the index. So it's a little bit of a trauma for me. So this is therapy for me to tell you about it. Then what is considered like the first copyright law worldwide was probably the law in 1662 in England. They were defining the right to copy, and that was a monopoly. I came together with censorship rights, and that was granted to printers. And these printers were collected in a guild, and that had in England the name of the Stationers' Company. So these printers had a monopoly, had the right to censor. The king was asking to censor books against the religion and so on. And sadly, there were no author rights defined in this first copyright law. So it was more for the publishers, what we call today, or for the printers then. And of course, the authors were not very happy because, okay, they could manage most often to, of course, not release their writings to the printers without asking money, first of all. But then afterwards, it seemed that printers were happily copying these books without giving the authors more money. So the authors were complaining like, hey, what about us? Do you think we will continue working while another makes money from our writings? So this led, after a few decennia, to the first real author rights laws. Some people call this one the first copyright law, the one of 1710. And I tell you because actually nobody's telling the history of copyright, or very few people are telling the copyright history like I do nowadays. And that's because history always gets rewritten by the winners. And in this story, it's the winners are the ones making most of the money with the copyright. But look, what I like about these first author right laws is that they had even in the title things like for the encouragement of learning. So the idea was really, look, what we want is for society to have many works which are useful for education and for research and for culture. So if these printers make it impossible for authors, then we must do something about this. We must make a balance. We must make a balance between what the public needs and what the others need. So they made a balance, they gave a privilege to the others, and they said, look, if you give a copy of your writing to the Royal Library and to each academic library in England at that time, then you can request a reproduction monopoly. You will be the only one to decide who make copies of your writing. If you request this, you get 14 years protection. And if you're still alive after 14 years, you can optionally ask another 14 years of protection monopoly. So that's 20 years of monopoly. That's the balance. And then afterwards, your work comes in the public domain. This means everybody can make copies, whatever, change it, whatever. Even maybe don't have to mention your name anymore. After 20 years, it becomes everybody's property or benefit. And this has also inspired, for example, the Constitution of America. In 1790, they wrote, to promote the progress of science and useful arts, it's possible to secure for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. So also there you see it's a balance. For a limited time, you get protection, but the main aim is to get as many as possible works in the public domain which are useful for the people. So these author rights laws, it's not about guaranteeing money, it's more about the incentive to get more works. Sadly, this has changed. Even with these author rights laws, the printers, the publishers have found a way out. And this is a drawing from 1886 or something. And this displays in the middle a pirate publisher. He's standing on the law, a book of law. And around him are writers. On their head is written their names. So they are famous writers like Mark Twain, Zola, from different countries, America, Germany, France, England. And they complain. They complain because the publishers take their copyrights and they print. And even sometimes without getting a contract or a copyright from the author, they do this, for example, internationally. So at that time, there was no international treaty like we nowadays have the Berne Convention. Nowadays, if you have a copyright in your own country, you automatically have it, well, most often everywhere in the world. But at that moment, not. And also, researchers among you will probably recognize this, that publishers nowadays, when you want to publish, for example, a scientific article, the publisher demands your copyrights and demands an exclusive license. So you are the writer, you try to collect the grants for your research, you write your article, you did the experiments, you write the article, you send it to a journal, and the journal says, okay, I want to publish it, maybe, but first of all, give me your copyrights. And then they search a peer reviewer, and that's against us, scientists. And so we do all the work, And the publisher, in the old time, they had to print on paper, work that universities didn't want to do, but now they're just putting it on a website. So it's a very small work that the publishers do, but still they run away with the copyrights, which means that we as a scientists have to pay to read the articles from our colleagues, and they are locked up. Publishers use this locking up, taking the copyrights a lot against the benefits of the others. For example, the average book gets printed in one version, one release, sells maybe for 2 years, and then the publisher doesn't want to print these books anymore. You as an author are not happy, and you say, hey, come on, that's not serious, people are still interested. And the publisher says no. And you think, okay, I'm gonna go to another publisher, or I print it myself. No, you gave your copyrights away to the publisher, so it's up to him to print additional copies, yes or no. What's the benefit for the publishers to not print your book anymore? Well, that's to keep the old books off the market. They always want to sell the new books, and they don't want the old books to undermine the new books, because of course the old books are typically a bit cheaper maybe. So you see there are many issues, and it's not so much the issues of the authors that the authors have with the general public making copies, because that's what is the rewritten history by the publishers. The publisher says, copyright, that's to protect the author against the illegal copying of the general public. No, it's to protect against pirate publishers, and it's still the main issue that authors have. And in practice, for us in education, this is a serious problem. For example, for students. I don't know how it is in Morocco with the prices for the books for students, but for example, in the United States, it's a very serious problem, and the students are revolting. They say, how is this possible? And I have to pay $900 a year for textbooks and course materials, and the price of these books are increasing very fast, 4 times faster than the rate of inflation. This has nothing to do anymore with the real cost. You will probably know, if you have written a book, you typically get nothing from the other. I have written 3 books, and I got no money at all for these books. I got, of course, no money for my scientific publications. So it's not there that the money disappears. So what's happening? Why are educational textbooks so expensive? Well, the evil publishers have evil tactics. They undermine the used book market. When I was young, much younger than now, for example, in primary and secondary school, there was the tradition of students buying second-hand books, and when they didn't need them anymore, to sell these books again second-hand, maybe you could say third-hand, which suppresses at least the price for the students that are okay with used books. But nowadays, publishers are fighting this a lot, and they are fighting this, for example, with bundling these textbooks with extras. The textbook is also a workbook, so the students write in the book. So after a year, that book is full with written notes by the students, so it's hard to get this one sold. But they bundle it, for example, with CDs or with codes for going online for extra exercises. Nice. But these stop working after a year. And while the law is protecting the sale of books that are printed, the laws are also forbidding people to sell certain licenses. If the publisher puts a license on software or on an electronic book, they can forbid that this is being sold. And then you might know as a professor that publishers try to get you using their book. For example, they sent me, I don't know, probably they look at websites and they see what is the topic I'm teaching, and they send me books about my topics. I must say, sometimes these are very nice books, very nicely illustrated, high quality, nice, no problem. But I don't know how much these books cost, but they tell me it's your free copy. So imagine that I like this book. Imagine that I don't have a course book myself. Imagine that I'm a first year starting professor, or it's my new course. Then it's very seductive for me to start with this book because it's saving me a lot of time. So I recommend my students that book. I don't know how much the students are paying. And this is why these prices can be so very crazy expensive, because normally you have an open free market of demand and supply. And in a free market, the consumer has a choice and they can say, okay, this book is crazy expensive. I'm going to use another book. There are so many books about these topics. I can choose one that is having a reasonable price. But in the textbook market, if the publisher sends a free copy to the professor, this free market is broken. The student cannot decide which book they're going to use. And then you still have these tricks like every year they send me an updated version of that book, a new print, which has a little bit changed, and the exercises have changed a bit and the passcode have changed. So this means professors are recommending typically every year a new print version to the student. So the student also feels very bad and anxious about buying not the 23rd print, but the 22nd print. So many problems. Now let's look how it is with the copyright laws. And I must say, since the International Berne Convention, this has been harmonized in many countries. So it's very similar in many countries. The details are different. So that's why I took your law, the Moroccan law. So you see the link if you would like to consult it later, but I have taken a summary, some citations which are most important, and the most important things for you as a teacher, because I've been teaching this to a lot of teachers in my university and future teachers in my university, because it's important. People are misjudging what is legally allowed. They think in two directions. They think that too many things are forbidden, and on the other way around, they don't know what is possible. So things which are possible, they think is not possible, and vice versa. So let's have a look. In Morocco, it's like in most of the countries nowadays, it changed. Nowadays, it's a model, all rights reserved, all rights for the author. And the author gets that monopoly, these copyrights, without asking. So in the past, you had to ask for it. Now it's automatically. You write something, the moment you publish it, it is protected by copyrights. It's no longer 14 years optionally plus 14 years optionally. Now it is 70 years after the death of the author. Why so long? Well, it's being said that it's 70 years now, and it's increasing every 10 years, or every 20 years, it's increasing with 20 years. And that's under the lobby work of publishers like Disney. The oldest works of Disney are 70 years old, and they don't want that their oldest works come free on the market without copyrights. Even while Disney have been reusing, copying so many traditional stories, centuries old, but okay, they could copy, but nobody else can copy their works. So 70 years after the death of the author. So if the author is dead, it's up to their inheritance to decide who can make a copy or not. Luckily, there are exceptions, and there are exceptions, for example, for private reasons. I don't know how this goes in Morocco. This I didn't read, but for example, in Belgium, for private reasons, you can make copies for yourself from articles, parts at least of books, movies, and so on. But there are also specific exceptions for libraries, for example, but also for education. And so how is it in Morocco? In Morocco, you have your Article 15 in the copyright law, and that says that there are some things allowed for education. For example, it is allowed without the permission of the author and without paying the author or anybody to use a work, once it is published in a legal way, for illustration. So this means in your course or in your course material, you are talking about your topic and you want to add an illustration, you can use a work to illustrate what you're talking about. Then there is another exception, that is to reproduce works. And you can reproduce many kinds of works. It's a little bit limited to, for example, isolated articles, single articles from, for example, journals, so for example, scientific articles, and then short extracts from works which are legally published, or other short works. And probably, I didn't read all the details in your law, but for example, in many laws, in Belgian law, things are not defined until the necessary detail. For example, what is reasonably short? What is short enough? What is too long? That is probably not defined. Another requirement, but that's an easy one and a very fair one, is that you, of course, when possible, share the source and the name of the author. So that's one set of exceptions. But in copyright law, you typically have things like reproduction and then execution. And for example, for showing something on a website, you also need so-called execution rights. And luckily here, you also have that exception. In Belgium, this was problematic for a while. I had to lobby, I think until 2005, we had reproduction exceptions for education, which meant that we could copy many photographs and articles for our students, but we could not show one photograph on a website for our students without asking permission and so on. Luckily, this changed. And also for you, I think it's okay. So you have an exception for execution rights. So it's allowed without the permission of the author and without paying to show something to the public in the framework of your educational activities. But the restriction is that you can only show it to people from your educational institution, for example, your students or the staff. So this is nice to have, but this is not enough. For example, that limitation only for your students, this means that as soon as your website is being opened for the general public, for non-students, then you don't get this exception anymore. So it's doable, workable for private courses, even for private online courses, with the registration of every student, with a login, but it's not okay for what is nowadays more popular, these open courses. Then you cannot use that specific exception, and so you will have to ask permission to the author. And maybe that author is going to ask money, or the author is going to say, sorry, I would like you to use my work, but the publisher has my copyrights. You have to ask my publisher. And the publisher says, yeah, sure, I want to sell you a license. Okay. So what else is problematic typically, and also with your law, is, for example, the larger works, like a complete book or a complete movie, that's not permitted. Modifying a work, translating a work, there's no exception for this. And like I said, showing on public websites. So, is there any solution? Yes, luckily. So the law gives the monopoly, first of all, to the author, but the author has the right to give license to other people or to other organizations. And this is mostly used by publishers. So the publishers say, okay, I'm going to publish your book if you give me the copyrights. And no, I want an exclusive license, so you cannot allow others to make copies. But this also allows authors to give license, for example, free for education or free for non-commercial usage. And this exists already quite long. And a few years ago, I think between 1 and 2 decades ago, academic people said, okay, we need something better. We need something that works in every country, which gets automated, which is easy for authors, which is nice, seductive, and so on. So they created so-called open licenses or free licenses. And with these licenses, then it's possible to have the concept of open educational resources. In French, ressources, éducatives, libres. And that's a concept which has quite many definitions. Here you see the definition by UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. They like open educational resources. They like them to be open because, one, this is important for access, for students, equal access, fair access, but it is also important for teachers. It's important for the quality, because if every teacher produces their own textbook and they work alone on the textbook, the quality will not be as high as textbooks on which many teachers are collaborating. So, okay, I'm jumping ahead. First of all, the definition. So the UNESCO definition is these open educational resources are materials for education, for learning, and for research. It can be digital or non-digital. And these works exist in the public domain, for example, after the author has died for more than 70 years, which is a bit too long to wait, of course, or the author decides, today I'm going to put the work in the public domain, or it's published under an open license. A license that allows the access, the usage, the modification, and the redistribution for others and free of cost, free of charge, without restrictions or with limited restriction, reasonable restrictions. Okay, there is the concept of the so-called 5R permissions of open educational resources. And that's about retaining, reusing, revising, remixing, and redistributing the works of another person. The difference might sound a little bit difficult. Don't worry, it's just to cover all the things necessary. So retain is mostly about, for you, you make a copy, or the student makes a copy, downloads, stores it on disk. Reusing is rather about you give it to others. You give it, for example, to your students in the class, you put it on internet. Revising is really about modifying the works, for example, also translating, cutting up. Every student, no, every teacher wants, of course, to optimize their learning and teaching materials for their students, for the learning level of the student, the language of the student, the prior knowledge, and so on. Yes, you want to modify this. You also want probably to mix works. You want to use a chapter from there, you want to use a picture from there, an animation from another work. So you create your own teaching material from many different sources. And then your remix, you want to redistribute this to others. So you need these 5 permissions. And to have these 5 permissions, I defined a few requirements. First of all, there should be no legal limitations. That's like it is set in the definition by UNESCO also. So the work should be public domain or should have an open free license. But what is often forgotten is that there should also not be technical limitations. For example, there should not be DRM, which is, according to the publishers, digital rights management. But people like me prefer to call this digital restrictions management because that is what is really happening with that technology. So this is limitation in software, for example, software for ebooks that tells your machine that, for example, it is not allowed to make a copy. It's not allowed to print or maximum 1 page. It's, for example, the ebook that's being done with educational ebooks. They stop working after a year. Or they don't work in a certain region. So, for example, the European version doesn't work in Africa or vice versa. This is very popular with video formats, and you still see this on websites. So in the past, it was a matter of DVDs, but they do this now on websites. This video is not available in your region. That's done with DRM. Of course, I don't expect that DRM will be put, that you will put DRM on your material. But there are other things technically to keep in mind, and that is, it's better for your students when you use open standard data file formats. So I will explain what is more open, what is less open. This is not very easy to know. I made a list for you. And then it's also, of course, nicer that it is usable for every student. And the best way to guarantee this is that your work is usable with free open source software. I should have added the word source there, free open source software, and I should have added cross-platform. You don't want to tell your student who uses a Mac or Linux, oh no, sorry, it's only for Windows, okay? So cross-platform. You see, it is about more than just open education resources and an open license. And there is nowadays a whole movement about openness. If you are a scientist, you have heard about open access, open data. Here we talk about open education resources, open education, we have open pedagogy, open peer review, open innovation, and so on. So these things are related and sometimes they are necessary together. So I discussed these requirements, but I will discuss them in more detail in the reverse order. I will start with free open source software because that also has been rather the first one to elaborate on the philosophies. to come with nice solutions, and these solutions and actually the results, the very high quality results, have inspired educators to do similar things for open educational resources. So the most influential person in the computer industry, and certainly for free software, is Richard Stallman. He was a programmer at the MIT University, and he linked open source software, free software actually, with teaching and education. And he said, okay, we educators, we are helping other people by teaching people how to better their world, how to better their life. And if you are a programmer, okay, most of you are probably not, but don't worry. Huh? If you are a programmer, this means sharing your programs and also the recipes, how these programs work. That's the source code. That's the language in which these softwares are written. The software source code is necessary to adapt software. So Richard defined already in the 1980s the concept of free software. And he says, look, it's not about the price. Free sounds like gratuit, but it's rather about la liberté, the freedom. And he defined 4 freedoms. Software should come with 4 freedoms. The freedom to execute, to run the program for whatever reason, to study how it works. And I've put this in another color because this is so crucial for education, of course. You cannot teach informatics students with closed source software and let them use, like the others, just the buttons, the superficial surface of the programs. You need to look inside. So to study, you need the source code. So to distribute is another right. So that you as a teacher can say, students, here is a copy of this software, and to modify the software. 4 fundamental freedoms. You hear, I say sometimes free software, sometimes open source software. That's because, especially in English, it's confusing, free software, especially for companies. People think free, gratis, gratuit, how can that be good? So after a while, some people said, okay, let's talk about another, with other words, let's call it open source software. But in French, it's more clear. There you say logiciel libre, maybe logiciel libre et ouvert. It has many names with these combinations like open source software or free open source software, or to make it more obvious, it's about the freedoms, free, libre, open source software, FLOSS. Maybe you will see one of these abbreviations further in my slides. But one way to look at it is the difference. Non-free software keeps secrets for you, hides the source code, doesn't give you access to the source code, denies you the right. So I am very principled in this. On my computers, I don't use such a secret closed source proprietary software. I don't trust it. There are many softwares, many softwares, and these are a few examples of things which can be used in education. Some of them you probably know. So, for example, for operating system, you can use Linux. This presentation is made in LibreOffice, which is similar to Microsoft Office. We are now using, sadly, Zoom. I didn't invite you in the Zoom environment. I was invited in the Zoom environment, which is actually proprietary software. But luckily, if you are invited and you go to the website, Zoom asks you twice, do you want to install the Zoom application or app if you are on the mobile? If you refuse twice, they show you join from the web browser. So I could do this. It's workable. But you have more open systems like Jitsi or Big Blue Button, which is specifically made by higher education for education. So that's like classroom conferencing. Yes. Video conferencing software can be crazy expensive, not because it's so expensive to produce, because it is possible to ask a lot of money. Well, it's changing, it's becoming cheaper, but it used to be very expensive because managers were saving a lot of money with not flying, not having hotels and so on. And then you have the e-learning platforms like OpenEdX, which we use in the Marmuk project. Others are like Moodle or Claroline, Camilo, the Chaos. Canvas is open source. Not many people know it because many institutions pay for the hosted solution, which is also possible. You have OpenCast for video. You have Mahara for portfolios. You have GIMP for graphics, and so on and so on and so on. So actually, it's huge. Actually, the heart of the operating system, Linux, the kernel, is produced by more than 13,000 developers that work together, even if they are in competition. Many of these people are employed by Google, Facebook, IBM, Intel, AMD, Microsoft, which are in direct competition, but they work together on free open source software. Why? Because they can trust it. What they contribute is protected by the license, by the free open source license. It's the highest quality, it's the most performant. For example, nowadays, 100% of the top 500 supercomputers in the world run GNU Linux. Actually, most of the computers in the world run what? Not Windows, but Linux. It's mainly Android. So Linux has many faces. You probably have Linux in your house without knowing it, in your phone, in your and so on. There is a lot of diversity. There are more than, for example, 300 Linux distributions for desktop, laptop servers, besides the mobile ones like Android. And in one of these Linuxes, for example, Debian Linux, you have more than 89,000 software packages. So it's never a matter of, I'm missing a software, there's not enough choice. No, the challenge is rather, okay, I have this task, which free software should I use? Because I see tens and tens of different software applications. Okay, there are many good reasons to use free software in education. It's about staying in control, staying secure, being open for everyone, allowing students to use this software without problems. It's also about avoiding data lock-in, vendor lock-in, being cross-platform, interoperable, and so on and so on and so on and so on. It's not a webinar about free open source software. I can talk hours about this, but okay. If you're doubting, you read this further. Also, if you're a developer, many reasons to develop free open source software. Then I said another thing which is required by open educational resources is having these educational resources in a reusable format. It's good that you, when you are producing your e-learning material on your computer, that you are already using free software and an open standard, but even if not, then export it to an open format like PDF. PDF is portable document format, portable because it's possible to run this everywhere, to open this everywhere. Microsoft, for example, didn't like PDF. They were boycotting it. The customers of Microsoft were asking for decades, please give us PDF export in Microsoft Office. For more than a decade, they had to ask for it because Microsoft didn't like that you could read PDFs without buying Windows. They are more open now, and they're supporting PDF now. But still, that's a bit of the history behind it. So mainly don't annoy other people, your students with restricted formats. PDF, of course, is not perfect in that sense that it's a publishing format. It's not easy to modify a file in PDF, to edit it. It's possible for your students to do highlight markups on it, to put notes on it, and so on. But really like inserting things, making easily a summary of it, and so on. That's not so nicely supported. It's rather a format for printers originally. Well, printers and showing in a fixed format. It's not like reflowing like web pages. Web pages, HTML, by the way, also very nice open format, of course, maybe the first preferred format to publish something. As a professor, as a teacher, also be aware that if you are asking homework from your students, don't ask specific file formats like Microsoft Office formats. First of all, it puts pressure on the student to buy Microsoft Office, while LibreOffice would probably be as good for them. But also, when they send you Microsoft Office files, you can get infected by the viruses in that format. And then there are considerations like use formats which are good for the things you need. For example, don't use raster-based graphics that has the pixels fixed. And then when you scale up the image, you see the pixels becoming better. There are better formats like vector-oriented graphical formats. If you scale it up, everything stays smooth because everything is defined in mathematical formulas, not by a pixel having a certain color. I don't know if this picture is clear for you. It's time for a joke finally, a comic. This is about the file formats PNG versus JPEG. On the left, you have the left of the graphics is done like it is done in PNG, it's compressed, but without losing information. Everything like the lines and the white color are solid. And JPEG is actually for photos. It has a lossy compression. It's throwing away the information, first of all, the information that the human eye cannot easily discern. So that's why you see typically when somebody is using JPEG format for non-photos, that the white around, for example, text is pixelated, having artifacts of gray. So, okay, that's about file formats. In general, I can add that it's better when a format is, of course, not secret, like the Microsoft Office formats. The old ones were very secret. The new ones are so-called open, but still with secret references like render, like Office 1997, and that format is not open. So, of course, this fails the definition of an open standard. So it's better to have at least a specification or a standard, and the difference is a standard is recognized by a standard office, a standard body. It's better when this standard, the description of this, how the standard looks, is openly published and not copyright or paywalled. Now you see this, for example, important for when you have electrical devices, it's standardized how the power plug should be. And as long as you stay in your country, you probably can plug in your electrical device in all the sockets because they're standardized. And to be able to know what is the standard, it's better that you should not pay, and the description about it is not kept secret, and there's not a patent on it, and so on. And then if it is a file format, it's of course better when it is easily usable with free open source software. If you are, I don't know, sharing a file produced in a specific software, and there's only one software that can open that file, your students feel forced to buy that software. That's not nice. Usable on multiple platforms. Most of all, nice if it is readable in browsers. So when you are uploading in your website a PDF readers are built in web browsers nowadays. Your visitors, your students don't have to leave the web browser. If you upload a Microsoft Office file, then that software will have to be opened. That is much slower. That's annoying people, especially on mobile and so on. And of course, you want the file format being high quality and efficient for the job. So that's the things I thought about. Things like PNG versus JPEG. Okay. Here I created a list for you and for others and for my students, future teachers, about which are the preferred file formats. In green, formats that have an issue. For example, it's a secret format or it has a patent on it. If it has a patent, it means not everybody can make software for it without having a license. And then you have two columns in green, free software to use with that format. And then in red, proprietary software, which is sadly more known. That's because when the software publishers ask money for the proprietary software, they use a lot of that money for advertisements, which is not being done for free open source software. So you see, if you want to publish something and you don't care so much or nobody cares about editing anymore, then PDF is a nice format and EPUB is a nice format. And there is lots of free open source software for it. I'm showing this PDF that I produced with LibreOffice. I'm showing it in Ocular, which is a software for Linux, but there's so many for it. Text documents, you have the open document format, which is the standard. It was the first standard for Office format, for Office files before Microsoft tried. That's why they are now pretending to be open, because government was telling Microsoft, look, if you don't have an open standard, we cannot use your software anymore. So you have these open document formats for text, for spreadsheets, for presentations. So the presentation is then LibreOffice Impress. But that open document format is used now in many softwares. I think, yes, even Microsoft Office has now a bit of support for open document format. So that's actually much nicer to share than things like Excel or Word or PowerPoint files. And for photos, I told you JPEG. For drawings, rather PNG, GIF. It used to be problematic with the patent on it, but that's a long time ago, so it expired. And SVG, scalable vector graphics, but not too many people can open this. That software is maybe not so popular. I wonder if it is built in web browsers nowadays. For audio, it's a little bit more complex. I still have MP3 there in red, but probably it's time to move it to green because there was a patent on it, and the patent lasts 20 years, and I think it has expired now. And audio is an example where Ogg Vorbis has for a long time been the better preferred format, but many devices that were sold on the market didn't have initially support for it, and so the support for MP3 was wider. So that's sometimes a conflict between what is the better format and what is the format that more people can open. That's also a bit the case in video. It used to be very difficult. You have video containers, and in these containers you can have different codecs. So you can have an open container with a closed codec or vice versa. Many of these video formats are patented, even very annoying for example, Google with its YouTube. So Google has been producing a lot of video codecs like VP8 and VP9, in which they shared in the public domain without any patents on it. And then if you want to share many files with your students and you want to bundle them in one file, you use a compression program. And zip used to be problematic, but is now expired patent open. You have 7-zip, which is very nice. And so there, the main thing to avoid is RAR, which is a proprietary format. And in general, avoid software like WinZip and WinRAR, because if it has Win in the name, then it's for one platform. And luckily, we got rid of the monopoly in software world, the monopoly by Microsoft. Okay, so I admit it's a bit complex, but listen to your students. When you share something, maybe ask, is it okay for everybody? Nobody having issues, everybody can consult it on their platform of choice. So we had the software, we had the file formats, and then what you expected, mostly probably the license. So by default, something is copyrighted, and then others cannot make copies. So that's here on the left of this gradient. The other side of the gradient, you have the public domain. So on the left, copyright is all rights reserved. On the right, PD, public domain, is no rights reserved. And Creative Commons allows you to choose something in the middle, because for many others, public domain is like, yeah, but then I have no control, maybe no attribution anymore. So many people don't like that too much. So academic people have defined a set of licenses, predefined set of licenses, and they give you choice. And they mainly ask 4 questions. 1, do you want for your work attribution, yes or no? So when others use your work, do they need to mention your name, yes or no? Second question, do you allow commercial usage, yes or no? If you say I allow commercial usage, then also companies can take your work and sell it. If you say no commercial usage allowed, then you're not forbidding it forever. But then a publisher should contact you and tell you, hey, professor, you made very nice learning, teaching material there. We as a publisher would like to commercialize it. Could we get a deal? And then you say, okay, if you make money with it, I can sell you a non-exclusive license and we agree for a bit of money, okay? Okay. So that's back to the standard that when they want commercial usage, they need to ask you. Other question is, do you allow modifications, yes or no? I would say for education, it's most useful to allow modification because every teacher wants to modify the works they use for their students. Or you want to translate it and so on. So no modification, I consider that something only for like an artist that say, okay, I made such a nice piece of art, I find it perfect, nobody should modify it. It's hardly fair, but okay, it's for these extreme use cases, I would say. And then the most difficult option, which also is causing a little bit of issues, I don't like it too much, is the option, do you want share alike, yes or no, we say in English. And that's sharing under the same license, yes or no, when you are remixing. You find a picture under a certain Creative Commons license, and you use it in your work, but you mix things with different licenses. The end work will have a certain license. You can do this with works that are not restricting changing the license. But if they restricted changing the license, then it's getting difficult to remix, to republish under another license. So I'm not advising. So in the past, I was choosing initially Creative Commons licenses with like no commercial users allowed, but I relaxed about this. I don't need this. So I'm using mostly attribution, CC by, just mention my name and I'm happy. Even if you make big money with it, I doubt, but even if you want, feel free so, okay? If you want to modify, okay. So with these 4 questions, yes, we have actually 7 resulting possible Creative Commons licenses. The first one, CC0, no name required. It's very similar to the public domain, but the public domain doesn't exist in all countries. while you're alive. For example, in Morocco, you have not only les droits patrimoniaux, the economic rights, but you also have the moral rights, of course. And the moral rights in Morocco, they are eternally. So mentioning the name is always necessary in Morocco. I hope that CC0 is helping in Morocco, probably, because these things get rewritten for the jurisdiction of each country. So CC0, CC by is attribution, you have to mention the name. Then you have the third one, attribution share alike, so you cannot change the license. And here you see in the last columns, you see the symbols being used. So you also see on my very first slide of the presentation, you simply see, I think, this symbol, which means you only have to mention my name. The fourth one is attribution, no modification allowed. Fifth one is attribution, but no commercial usage allowed. 6, attribution, not commercially, and you need to share alike. And then the other one is not commercially and no modification. So that's probably the most restrictive one. So you can just use it as it is. Okay, 7 licenses. How does it work in practice? Well, once you know these licenses, once you've picked your favorite one, it's of course easy. You put your favorite license on all these works. But the website of Creative Commons is actually helping you. This is a screenshot of the website, and it's showing you the process of selecting your Creative Commons license. And first it asks you 2 questions. Do you allow adaptations of your work to be shared? Yes or no? Or yes, as long as others share alike. And depending on the answer you give, here in the second square, your selected license will change. So it's adapting the license according to what you select. And the second question, very easy, is do you allow commercial uses of your work, yes or no? Then it tells you third, do you have a web page? Then it asks you to fill in your name and so on. And then it produces something for you to put on your website. But I will show this. I will open the Creative Commons website. I hope this will be coming. Maybe I clicked wrong. Yes. So this is the Creative Commons website. And you have here the button Share Your Work. Choose a license, get started. And you recognize the 2 questions I told you, and you see if you click on another answer, the license is changing. And if you say allow yes, yes, it shows you the symbol of a free cultural work. That's a very good one. That's a free cultural license. They like this. If you say more restrictive, it will say this is not a free cultural license. It's still nicer than only copyright, but it's not perfect. Help others attribute you. This part is optional. But actually, I see that today, I will increase a bit the fonts. Please consider using the chooser beta. So they have a new interface. I like the previous one very much, very easy. But the new one, let's try. Do you know which license you need? So if you say yes, you can simply choose your one. So that's like for the second time. But okay, today, most of us don't know. No, I need help selecting a license. Next step. Do you want attribution for your work? Yes. Okay, it's telling me recommended license, attribution 4.0, international. Okay, and it's telling me what this license requires. This license requires that reusers give credit to the creator. It allows reusers to distribute, remix, adapt, and build upon the material in any medium or format, even for commercial purposes. Cool. Next, do I want to allow others to use work commercially? What happens if I click no? Okay, it's changing. No, only commercial use of my work is permitted. Let's go with yes. Next step. Do you want to allow others to remix, adapt, or build upon your work? I'm a teacher. It's being used by students and other teachers, so yes, of course. Do you want to allow others to share adaptations under any terms? Yes, that's easier for remixes. Next step, attribution details. Okay, my name. URL. And you see, as soon as I have given my URL, here is the result. So they insert my name here, and under my name, they insert the link that I have given. And then the title of work, for example, OER copyrights, OER and copyrights, and the URL of that work is, for example, OER. Okay, and you see here is written OER and copyrights, and under it is a link going to that link of that work. There is my name, and there is a link to my website, and there is a license. And the license, I'm going to show that link later. So they advise you how to use this license. They say, okay, on the website, you mentioned this. On print work or media, you mentioned this. So this I can, for example, copy in SlideShare, but even SlideShare has an option, Creative Commons attribution, and I selected that already earlier this morning. So let's go to the page. They ask a donation. Okay, not now. So they give me a page with a short explanation. You are free to share, adapt under the following terms, attribution, no additional restrictions, notices. The license is available in different languages. There is, of course, French. Okay. And it's also available in different jurisdictions, but then I should take the legal version. And where do I have here? It's only a summary this. Here is the license, the real license. Official translations in other languages. This one is the English one. And you see, this is a version for legal specialists. Let's go back to my presentation. So they are giving you things to insert in your website, also so-called RDF. I think Resource Description Framework. It's a technical piece to insert in your website, and like this, other software, machines, searching engines know what your website, your web page is about, and what is the license. So here I have the same in French. So Creative Commons gives you actually 3 layers. It gives you the real thing, legal license, written or internationally, or for a specific country to be compatible with the jurisdiction of that specific country. And that's for legal specialists. But then for other people, you have the human readable summary. And a third layer is the one readable for machines. And this is very useful. And it's in websites, in tools you are probably using every day, and maybe you even didn't know. So this allows search engines. And here you have the Creative Commons search engine. And you see you can search for a specific thing and then say where to search. So you recognize a few things, probably like Google Images, but also YouTube is supporting this. So you can search for videos which are freely licensed in YouTube. So let's try this. So I search, for example, for OER, and I want something that I can use for commercial purposes. No, I'm an educator, so I don't need this, and something I can modify. Well, I just want to use it in my presentation now, so I will be less strict. And I say, okay, Google Images. And you see, Google Images is showing here the option labeled for non-commercial reuse. And there are other ones, and this is compatible with these Creative Commons licenses. So you can find this directly in Google if you go to Google Advanced. I will show in my presentation. So if you're not using the simple interface of Google, but the advanced one, you see in the bottom usage rights, and you can filter on a specific license. I will show on the real website. So I'm now in Google Advanced Search. The address is simply google.com/advanced search. And so I can here search for like OER, and I can say in the bottom, I want things free to use or share. That's something that I use very much for preparing presentations. When I know that my presentation will be on the internet, I need to have permission for each picture I include, so I can automate that search in Google by including this. You see, it's not very easy to see what's happening now in the normal listing of Google, but if you go to images, it remembers there is still labeled for non-commercial reuse. So if I change this not filtered by license, you see different results, and you see things which are also copyrighted. Like the first one is like a book cover, and this one is probably copyrighted and not allowed to reuse. Okay. So very useful for teachers. Know how to Google for free open educational resources. Now, a few examples. So it's not only a matter of search engines, but there are also platforms specialized in sharing materials, open content, or even open learning materials. My first example is maybe the oldest one. It's not really educational resources, it's open content. It started already in 1971, and it's a collection of public domain books. So mostly old books, books of which the copyright has expired. The author is more than 70 years dead. This is, of course, not for all teachers. This is mainly for teachers in literature, for example. Another example, which was a fundamental moment in the history of open educational resources, that was the moment when the MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology in America, decided in 2001 to open up all their course materials. So they said as a university, look, all the professors has to follow this new rule. You get maybe 1 year to comply. Your teaching materials should be open on the web and under a free Creative Commons license. This doesn't mean that the teaching is open. This doesn't mean that you can follow the course online. Sometimes yes, sometimes no on this platform, but at least the teaching materials are there. And this became extremely, extremely popular. So all over the world, people were using these materials. Students were using these materials when they had troubles with their own course, they wanted to consult another source, or teachers were using this and were translating this in Chinese and whatever their language was, very popular. So why did MIT do this? One, it's of course good for reputation, and two, imagine that a student comes to your university website and consult your learning materials and like it so much that they are learning. The moment they decide to take an examination or certification, they will not go to another university, but they will go to the university, pay at university that has shared the learning material. So even if only a fraction of a percent is going for a certification, if you have millions of users, this is still quite many users that go for a paid certification. Another interesting example is Merlot. Merlot is a website. The teaching is not happening there. The learning materials are not there. It's more like a catalog that is compiling a list of almost 100,000 learning materials. They are not all really open educational resources, but at least it's like open access. You can go to it and you can consult it. So it's like a directory. It's referring you to other websites. Let me show you. The nice thing about this catalog, I will take browse materials, is that they have found very early on, as one of the first ones, a good method for quality assurance. So yes, you have the possibilities of ratings and peer reviews and comments, but they also allow teachers to create on Merlot a teacher page. And so teachers can on Merlot create a teacher page with links to learning materials which are in the Merlot catalog. And they can use the teacher page for the students. So Merlot has a very good idea. If many teachers are referring to a learning object, that means teachers are appreciating this object. This is a high quality learning object.
Pardon, Frédéric?
Yes?
Oui, I think you have 10 minutes left.
Okay.
It will be 1 hour. Okay.
Okay. Thank you for telling me. So let me quickly show an example DNA from the beginning. You see things like how is it with the Creative Commons license. You can go to the material and you see it's very nice to find learning materials which have like animations. Here it's a simple animation, so the student can go forward. So you spend as a teacher a bit of time to consult many of these materials, and you see there is something that you can recommend to your students. I continue. Then you have websites specialized specifically for open educational resources, and this is OER Commons. So also here you can search for your topic and you can say, okay, it's for higher education or not, and so on. Then conceptually a step further was the website connections. They allow you to, as a teacher, use learning objects on the site, remix them on the site. So from small components, make larger materials like from chapters and pictures and animations. You create your own book, for example, on there. And you can decide, okay, I'm going to consult with all my colleagues of my department to create together, or with everybody that's teaching in my country, in my topic, I will consult them who wants to work together to the best book about my topic. So that's conceptually very nice. Sadly, today I see that connection is retiring a bit. And so they are probably not allowing anymore to produce the materials on their website. They still have a retirement phase where you can consult the existing books. Probably, I think somebody is going to pick it up, the concept, to continue. Then you have the ones that you will also like, which are in French. You have, for example, Idée Neuf, with more than 30,000 pedagogical resources. So that's really for higher education francophone. Similar, but then from the French government, also a platform with mainly French materials for higher education. And then you have since a while the concept of MOOCs. And you have heard that I was invited by the colleagues because they know me from the MARMOOC project. I will explain a little bit later. So what's a MOOC? It's a massive open online course. There are many different kinds nowadays. What is massive? Is that 100 students? Is that 100,000 students? Open, what does it mean open? The content open? I hope so, but sometimes nowadays not anymore. Open registration, free of charge? Yes, no, sometimes. Of course, online. And course, yeah, there can be many different kinds of courses, you know. And then you have the X and the C, which is more focusing on massive or focusing more on the open pedagogy, the original one, the connectivist MOOCs. And so you can not only find a lot of educational resources like small learning objects, but you can nowadays also find complete courses or even master degrees or bachelor degrees, which are given in this MOOC format. And one of the popular platforms, EDX, is a non-profit organization. And nowadays, more than 140 universities are working together. It started in the United States, but if you want to join, you can no doubt join. Students can be asked money for following a course, yes or no. That's optional. An option by the teacher. Then you have commercial initiatives like Coursera. Also, many universities use this platform, but also many companies use this one. And here, so the business model is rather, okay, maybe you can follow for free. Typically, you can follow it for free. But then if you want a certificate, you pay for the examination for the certificate. And then I end with MARMOOC. So MARMOOC is an Erasmus Plus project. 6 Moroccan universities that produce MOOCs and private courses also. And they do this together with, I think, 6 European universities, including mine. So very soon you will see...
le nom de domaine, c'est www.marmook.ac.ma. Donc, où il y a les SPOOC et les MOOC de toutes les universités, d'un certain nombre d'universités marocaines. Merci.
Do I say Marmook, ma? Or I need to
.ac.ma. Mais il va être le 3 juillet, on va publier le site web. Oui, pas encore...
Okay. 2 days too early. Okay, but I have this screenshot from the project website, which is more describing how we did the project, the work packages, the partners, and so on. So yes, let me summarize. So time is almost up also. So summarize, what can you do? So I summarize with recommendations. So I think, first of all, it's good for you for saving time and for increasing your quality that you know where to search for learning materials that you can reuse. Don't think you need to develop all your teaching materials from scratch. So there are many different platforms. Try many until you're reasonably sure that you found very good material. Still, if you produce material yourself, please share it. Share it under a free license. So we have seen how to select a Creative Commons license. Don't be too restrictive. It will not help you a lot if you are choosing a restrictive license. It's helping others if you choose a more permissive and more free open license. Then also use open standards for your file formats. Think about in which format do you publish your material, and use your free open source software whenever possible. In general, it's possible for all tasks, but even if you feel addicted to proprietary software, some specific ones, at least take a few minutes to search which are the free open source alternatives that you can recommend your students. So dare to share is the motto of today. It's like fire. You are not having less fire if you're giving fire to somebody else. Okay, additional credits and time for questions. Thank you for your attention. I see we have 220 people following the YouTube stream. I don't know how many we have in the Zoom session.
187, actually.
That's in Zoom, 200?
Yeah.
Okay, very nice.
Thank you, Frédéric. Merci beaucoup, Frédéric, pour cette présentation très, très constructive et intéressante. Je ne reviendrai pas sur les différents points, mais pour résumer, nous avons pu voir ensemble un petit peu, tout d'abord un historique sur l'origine des publications depuis le XIVe siècle, donc lorsque les livres étaient rédigés à la main. Pas simplement en Europe, mais bien avant. Moi, j'ajouterais à Frédéric aussi que dans le monde musulman, il y avait aussi des religieux qui avaient pour tâche d'écrire des livres à la main, calligraphier, ce qu'on appelait la calligraphie. Donc, que ce soit en Andalousie, au monde musulman, en Andalousie, au Maroc aussi, ça a continué jusqu'à la fin du 19e siècle, début 20e. Donc, nous avons pu avoir une idée justement sur cet aspect. Vous avez parlé également de l'importance des ressources éducatives libres et vous avez, je crois, bien expliqué un petit peu la notion de Creative Commons, quels sont les différents types, quelles sont les différentes catégories de Creative Commons, comment rendre sa production accessible à tout le monde via plusieurs outils sur le web et aussi des recommandations. Je pense que c'est très important. Alors, je voudrais juste ne pas abuser de votre temps, mais parler également de l'expérience marocaine dans le domaine des ressources éducatives libres. Nous ne sommes pas en reste. Il y a eu beaucoup d'expériences, surtout au niveau universitaire. Malheureusement, beaucoup d'expériences ne sont pas allées jusqu'au bout, justement à cause des restrictions, on va dire, bureaucratiques, on va dire, administratives, voire même parfois académiques. Ce que je pourrais dire, c'est que l'implémentation de l'éducation ouverte, donc Open Education d'une manière générale, je parlerai de l'université, surtout au sein de l'université, elle passe avant tout, est-ce que tout le monde m'entend, ça va? Passe avant tout par une volonté, ça c'est important de le dire, une volonté de changement des pratiques pédagogiques dans les institutions d'enseignement supérieur. Il va de soi que ce changement, à mon avis, nécessite un engagement de tous les composants qui constituent, on va dire, la grande famille de l'enseignement au Maroc. Les enseignants, les administratifs, les étudiants, les décideurs, etc. Alors, le problème ne se limite pas seulement à offrir les moyens matériels et les solutions techniques qui sont souvent, ou le plus souvent, surmontables depuis quelques années, mais plutôt, le problème réside dans la gestion du changement et on va dire aussi du basculement vers un environnement ouvert de partage des ressources éducatives libres et aussi par la mise en place de ce qu'on peut appeler des pratiques éducatives libres. Alors, bien sûr, tout cela cadre parfaitement avec l'engagement des universités en matière du numérique, ce que nous appelons depuis quelques années le numérique pédagogique, pour faire valoir le rendement d'apprentissage du particulier. Il y a eu beaucoup d'expériences au sein des universités marocaines. Je reviendrai tout à l'heure sur l'une des plus importantes, à savoir le projet OpenMed. Donc, ces expériences ont montré un grand intérêt du principal utilisateur qui est l'étudiant. Donc, il ne faut pas l'oublier. Alors, ce dernier, l'étudiant d'une manière générale, arrive à l'enseignement supérieur pour enrichir son savoir, bien sûr, mais aussi pour développer ce qu'on peut appeler son savoir-faire, sachant que aujourd'hui, le monde du numérique lui offre toutes les possibilités, tout ce dont il aura besoin, sans pour autant se déplacer jusqu'à l'université. La pandémie de Covid-19 a bien démontré cela, ce renouveau, ce sursaut, cette renaissance de l'enseignement à distance et du numérique d'une manière générale. Mais ça, ce n'est pas le sujet de notre discussion. Donc, moi, je pense personnellement qu'en tant qu'enseignant ou chercheur, nous devons quand même assurer à cet étudiant une valeur ajoutée, profitant de l'enseignement présentiel disponible et lui assurer aussi également, de la part des enseignants, une flexibilité et une interactivité d'apprentissage qui va l'aider, on va dire d'une manière générale, à profiter du temps dont il dispose tout au long de sa formation. Voilà donc ce que je pourrais dire. Alors, l'importance des ressources éducatives libres n'est peut-être pas très ressentie dans notre environnement universitaire, mais de par le monde, surtout en Europe, en Amérique du Nord, beaucoup de pas ont été parcourus. Alors, dans l'ordre des choses, le projet dont je vais vous parler, j'essaierai d'être très bref et de mettre l'accent sur ce qui est important. Le projet OpenMed, qui est un projet financé par le programme Erasmus+, qui était doté de 1 million d'euros et qui a commencé fin 2015 et qui a pris fin en 2018. Alors, l'objectif global de ce projet, qui a regroupé des universités sud-méditerranéennes, on va dire, donc le Maroc essentiellement, le Maroc, l'Égypte, la Jordanie, donc de la rive sud de la mer Méditerranée, mais aussi des partenaires européens, d'Italie, d'Espagne, d'Angleterre, qui ont contribué à, on va dire, lancer ce projet très, très important. Alors, l'objectif de l'OpenMed, comme son nom l'indique, open, donc il y a l'ouverture, hein, quand il y a ça, c'est essentiellement de sensibiliser et faciliter l'adoption des ressources éducatives ouvertes, qu'on appelle en français REL, ou OER en anglais, et des pratiques éducatives ouvertes également dans les pays sud-méditerranéens, donc ce qu'on appelle communément les pays arabes, on va dire, donc ce sont des pays du bassin méditerranéen, avec essentiellement un accent particulier sur l'enseignement supérieur dans ces pays, à savoir donc l'Égypte, la Jordanie, le Maroc et la Palestine, que j'ai oublié de citer. Alors, l'objectif, comme je viens de dire, du projet, c'est de favoriser le rôle des universités en tant que fournisseurs de connaissances, non seulement pour les étudiants et le campus, mais aussi au-delà des murs des institutions en particulier, par exemple vers les groupes défavorisés, par exemple les personnes à faible revenu, les étudiants handicapés, les personnes vivant dans des zones rurales, etc. Donc le projet OpenMed est un projet de coopération internationale qui vise, donc il a été financé ou cofinancé par le programme Erasmus, mais également par le gouvernement qui ont contribué, même si à faible échelle. Alors, pourquoi ce projet? Tout simplement parce que dans l'enseignement supérieur, le bon sens pour l'accès égal, j'allais dire, et démocratique aux connaissances, c'est ça le rôle, et stimuler également l'offre et la demande dans le domaine des ressources éducatives libres de haute qualité, ce qui est essentiel pour moderniser l'enseignement. Il va de soi que si les universités veulent vraiment trouver des ressources pour investir dans un meilleur enseignement et une meilleure recherche, il est essentiel, ça va de soi, d'encourager le partage, comme a dit Frédéric, c'est très important, le partage ouvert des ressources. Ça, on peut dire que les connaissances doivent être partagées et diffusées, mais les enseignants encouragés également à réseauter, collaborer, produire des ressources qui seront profitables à tout le monde. Donc, en utilisant ces ressources librement, qui sont disponibles librement, les enseignants et les étudiants peuvent collaborer à la compilation du matériel et des ressources du cours, par exemple, ouvrant les salles de classe à de nouvelles formes d'apprentissage, par exemple les MOOC, les cours en ligne, etc. Et ce qui va nécessairement favoriser l'expérience d'apprentissage et l'améliorer grâce à une plus grande implication. Bien sûr, pour réaliser cela, il faudrait quand même un changement d'attitude. Ça, c'est le plus important. Un changement d'attitude envers ce que nous entendons par éducation, enseignement et apprentissage. C'est-à-dire qu'il faudrait changer des mentalités. Nous avons besoin de nouvelles attitudes, si j'ose dire, envers la collaboration et le partage, etc. Alors, je ne rentrerai pas dans le détail du projet qui a pris fin malheureusement en 2018, mais il a laissé quand même beaucoup d'héritage, je vous en parlerai très rapidement. Il y avait des objectifs aussi spécifiques, essentiellement sensibiliser et élargir la participation aux pratiques et ressources éducatives ouvertes, définir des feuilles de route, ce qu'on appelle des stratégies à moyen terme et à long terme, notamment les déclarations. Je vous parlerai de la déclaration du Maroc, que peu au Maroc connaissent, mais dans le monde des REL, elle est très connue, comme la déclaration d'Écosse, la déclaration de Paris, etc. Donc, définir des feuilles de route stratégiques à moyen terme pour la mise en œuvre des différents agendas, enseigner aux professeurs d'université plus particulièrement comment utiliser et réutiliser les REL dans un contexte pédagogiquement riche et améliorer ainsi leurs compétences numériques. Et aussi, on ne peut pas ignorer que l'un des objectifs du projet était de piloter des pratiques pédagogiques ouvertes, comme des startups, par exemple, proposer aux étudiants des contenus et des parcours d'apprentissage flexibles en lien avec la communauté internationale sur le besoin du match. Alors bien sûr, le projet a duré 3 ans, il y a eu des résultats, il y a eu on va dire des impacts sur les pratiques. Quelqu'un me dira, oui, mais on ne voit rien venir. Très bien, bien sûr. Dans le projet, il y a eu beaucoup de rencontres, il y a eu beaucoup de colloques, que ce soit dans les pays méditerranéens, que ce soit en Europe, et il y a eu pas mal de décisions qui ont engagé les décideurs. Moi, je vais simplement mettre l'accent sur un aspect important, c'est celui de... alors, avant de dire, il y a eu des entrevues d'experts des forums stratégiques, ce qu'on appelle les forums stratégiques nationaux, c'est-à-dire des rencontres au niveau, on a eu à Marrakech, il y en a eu à Madrid, il y en a eu à Amman, il y a eu en Palestine, etc. Il y avait des agendas régionaux et surtout, ça a permis de créer ce que nous appelons les centres d'innovation pour l'éducation ouverte. Il y en a un à l'université de Nosora, dans laquelle j'exerce, où je dirige le centre. Nous avons un centre d'innovation pour l'éducation ouverte. Nous avons aussi créé, surtout, un cours en ligne que je vais vous montrer tout à l'heure, qui est accessible à tout le monde. Aujourd'hui, n'importe quelle université, n'importe quelle institution peut utiliser ce cours de façon libre donc pour rester dans l'esprit de l'éducation ouverte. Alors, la déclaration du Maroc, je vais essayer de partager avec vous. Une seconde. Voilà. Voilà. Bon, j'espère que vous pouvez voir l'écran ici. Donc, c'est une pétition. Alors, la déclaration du Maroc a pris naissance lors d'une journée de l'éducation ouverte qui a eu lieu à l'université Qadiriyad, 2 jours au fait, le 6 et le 7 décembre 2016, dans le cadre du projet. Donc, au cours de la discussion, les éducateurs marocains ont convenu que l'un des plus grands défis auxquels les universités sont confrontées, peut-être pas toutes les universités, mais je parle des universités du Sud, par exemple l'université de Nosor, où il y a 140 000 étudiants et qui couvre 52% du territoire marocain. Donc la massification, ou la massivité, qui ne doit pas être considérée comme un problème négatif, mais qui peut quand même inciter à adopter d'autres outils, d'autres démarches pour pouvoir résoudre ce problème. Pendant le forum, il y a eu des discussions sur les pratiques ouvertes, à l'instar, comme j'ai dit tout à l'heure, de l'Écosse, la déclaration écossaise sur l'éducation, ainsi que la déclaration ouverte de Paris sur les REL, avec des fondations et la participation de beaucoup d'univers. Alors, l'université de Qadiriyad et l'université Ibn Zohar d'Agadir, qui sont à la tête de ce projet, donc notamment mon collègue Khalid Barrada et moi-même, nous avons entamé une consultation avec les éducateurs, les experts, la communauté de projet MED, etc., même avec l'équipe écossaise qui a dirigé, c'est-à-dire notamment Lorna Campbell, pour rédiger cette déclaration. Bien que ça a été un projet, mais nous avons milité pendant 3 ans pour pouvoir promouvoir cette déclaration du Maroc. Alors, je ne veux pas vous lire, vous pouvez la consulter sur le site du projet, mais également on l'a publiée sur change.org. Elle s'adresse aux autorités marocaines et internationales, aux institutions d'éducation, aux écoles primaires, secondaires, aux universités, qu'elles soient privées ou publiques, y compris les bibliothèques, les galeries, etc. Donc, c'est tout un public cible. Alors, elle a été guidée par deux considérations. L'éducation ouverte peut élargir l'accès à l'éducation, le transfert de la connaissance, notamment l'inclusion sociale. Et la deuxième considération, c'est qu'il existe un cas économique solide pour l'éducation ouverte, c'est-à-dire la libéralisation des ressources éducatives dont parlait Frédéric, financées par des fonds publics sous licence ouverte. Cela représente un retour sur investissement et des dépenses publiques. Durant donc ce forum de stratégie qui a eu lieu à Marrakech, des initiatives existantes, il y en a eu, on ne peut pas le nier, dans le domaine de l'éducation ouverte, ont été présentées, essentiellement dans les pays européens. Je citerai aussi des cadres ouverts pour l'apprentissage amélioré, etc. Donc, l'étape consistait simplement à associer toutes ces initiatives et à élaborer un soutien et des conseils stratégiques pour permettre le changement de culture qui est très important pour faciliter le développement, notamment dans l'enseignement supérieur. Alors, je ne rentrerai pas dans les détails, mais il y a eu des recommandations. Toutes les recommandations s'appuient sur la déclaration de l'UNESCO, que tout le monde connaît, les REL à Paris 2011. Alors, je citerai essentiellement et rapidement le fait de favoriser la sensibilisation à toutes les formes d'éducation ouverte dans tous les secteurs de l'éducation marocaine, promouvoir les pratiques d'éducation ouverte, l'utilisation des ressources éducatives libres, Encourager également l'utilisation des licences ouvertes, le Creative Commons dont parlait Frédéric tout à l'heure, pour tous les documents éducatifs produits avec des fonds publics, ce qui permettra bien sûr différents types d'utilisation. Également, encourager le développement et l'adaptation des ressources libres dans diverses langues locales, essentiellement les langues officielles, mais également les langues locales, dans divers contextes culturels. Essentiellement aussi soutenir le développement d'outils TIC conviviaux pour trouver, récupérer, partager des ressources éducatives. Renforcer l'élaboration de stratégies institutionnelles pour les ressources éducatives ouvertes. Appuyer le renforcement des capacités sur l'éducation ouverte grâce à des programmes de développement professionnel, etc. Rapidement, je passe, vous pouvez le consulter. Favoriser, ça c'est important aussi, les alliances stratégiques en éducation ouverte au niveau national et international. Encourager et financer la recherche sur l'éducation ouverte afin de constituer ce qu'on pourrait appeler une base solide de données probantes pour l'investissement public. Soutenir la communauté de l'éducation ouverte au Maroc en organisant des événements, des rencontres, des colloques, des tables rondes, etc. Voilà donc, grosso modo, on va dire les recommandations faites dans le cadre de cette déclaration, dite déclaration du Maroc. Il me reste aussi à parler un petit peu des résultats, c'est-à-dire qu'il y a eu beaucoup de travail et le plus important, c'est que nous avons réalisé un cours en ligne, pour ne pas parler de MOOC, ce n'est pas un MOOC puisque c'était un cours tutoré. Il y avait des tuteurs, donc le cours a été suivi. Alors nous avons organisé une rencontre à Turin, en Italie, parce que l'Institut technologique de Torino était aussi partenaire dans le projet. Nous avons, pendant une semaine, nous avons mobilisé plus de 90 apprenants de différentes universités impliqués dans le projet pour une semaine, une rencontre d'une semaine pour suivre en présentiel une formation sur les ressources éducatives libres. Je vais partager avec vous un petit peu rapidement parce que le cours, c'est très important. Il existe jusqu'à aujourd'hui, même après la fin du projet. Voilà donc. Le cours se présente sous trois langues. Il y a l'anglais, la version anglaise, la version française et la version arabe. Donc tout ça, nous avons pu travailler les contenus. Donc je vais un petit peu ouvrir au hasard, par exemple, le cours en français. Alors, je répète que ces cours sont accessibles sur le site du projet et que n'importe quelle institution peut l'utiliser de manière libre. Donc, il peut l'utiliser pour former ses enseignants, ses étudiants, etc. Alors, le cours est composé essentiellement de 5 modules. Rapidement, je vous les énonce. Le premier module qui est donc introduction à l'éducation libre, oui, qui comprend plusieurs leçons, par exemple les bénéfices et l'impact de l'éducation libre, le mouvement de l'éducation libre dans l'histoire, un petit peu l'historique de cet aspect. Ensuite, le module 2 qui s'intitule Licence et copyright en éducation, où il y a des activités, il y a des ressources, des exemples de licences open source, comme on a parlé, Frédéric, comprendre les Creative Commons dans les détails, introduction à l'open science et les principes fondamentaux, les concepts fondamentaux de l'accès à ce qu'on appelle l'open data. Également, le module 3 aussi est très important parce qu'il parle de l'ouverture de l'éducation à travers les ressources éducatives libres et les MOOC. C'est un module très important dans lequel il y a donc quels sont les principes et les pratiques, considérations dans les ressources éducatives libres. Et il y a également l'utilisation, la réutilisation, reusing, la réutilisation et le remixage des REL, création et le partage de comment partager ses propres ressources. Frédéric vous en a donné un exemple, comment faire. Comment créer une ressource éducative libre, comment utiliser des MOOC, etc. Ensuite, le module 4, localiser les ressources éducatives libres et les MOOC. Donc, ce module assez pratique donc, a pour rôle, par exemple, comprendre les environnements d'apprentissage et les diversités dans les réseaux. Et il comprend également comment adapter culturellement un MOOC, comment manager la diversité des groupes, ça c'est le côté assez, je dirais, social, voire même anthropologique, etc. Et enfin, le module 5 qui s'intitule les pratiques de l'éducation ouverte, donc qui a été réalisé par l'université de Birzeit, notre collègue Oussama Mimi. Ce module, il parle du concept donc, des pratiques libres. Il parle également comment planifier votre propre réseau de ressources éducatives libres, comment créer les réseaux, network, donc pour les enseignants, l'utilisation des outils de collaboration, ce qu'on appelle collaborative tools, etc. Donc vous voyez, tous ces modules sont accessibles et n'importe qui peut y accéder, même dès demain. Enfin, juste rapidement, je vous montre un petit peu la version arabe, donc où il y a un petit peu tous les éléments qui concernent le cours, etc. Voilà, en gros, je ne voudrais pas m'étaler sur ce projet qui a, à mon avis, il a constitué une première, parce qu'au Maroc, avant, on ne connaissait pas les ressources éducatives libres, c'était un concept assez abstrait, on entendait parler, mais on n'a jamais testé ou bien compris son importance. Alors maintenant, avant que je termine et je donne la parole aux participants pour poser leurs questions, c'est très bien. Nous avons travaillé pendant 3 ans, nous avons réalisé des choses, mais maintenant, s'il n'y a pas d'implication des décideurs, et quand je dis les décideurs, je parle du gouvernement, je parle des universités, je parle des décideurs politiques, s'il n'y a pas cette volonté d'accorder l'importance pour rouvrir toutes les ressources et les rendre accessibles aux chercheurs, aux étudiants, etc., c'est que nous ne pouvons pas avancer. On peut faire une dizaine de déclarations, on peut faire une dizaine de rencontres, d'incitations, mais s'il n'y a pas cette volonté politique, cette volonté, je dirais même culturelle, je dirais même académique, pour accorder aux REL, aux ressources éducatives libres, l'importance qu'elles ont, comme ce qui se passe dans les pays scandinaves, en Europe occidentale, voire même en Amérique du Nord, nous ne pouvons que continuer sur ce rythme, ma foi, très très triste, où chaque enseignant, lorsqu'il publie un article ou quelque chose, il le garde pour lui-même, il ne le montre pas aux autres. C'est un outil qui va servir pour une promotion académique ou autre. Et cet esprit de partage, malheureusement, s'il ne prévoit pas, finalement, on ne peut pas avancer. Mais nous continuons quand même à y croire. Et des personnes qui sont intéressées et des projets comme le projet Marmouk, qui va dans ce sens, puisque le projet Marmouk est un projet de création de MOOC au Maroc. D'ailleurs, en parlant de MOOC, nous avons créé avec l'Université de Marrakech le MOOC REL, Ressources éducatives libres, qui est hébergé et qui va être lancé incessamment sur le Maroc Université numérique, sur la plateforme de Maroc Université numérique. Voilà donc ce que j'avais à dire, et je compte beaucoup sur la discussion. S'il y a des gens qui aimeraient participer ou donner leur propre point de vue, ils sont les bienvenus. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Monsieur Makarri. Thank you, Frédéric. Monsieur Makarri, est-ce que vous arrivez à voir les questions et les mains levées?
Oui, alors je vais regarder j'ai juste dans la conversation du groupe, il y a des questions qui me paraissent intéressantes.
Tout à fait. Et peut-être aussi en même temps donner la parole en attendant à Madame Hanan Khalqi.
Oui, il n'y a pas de souci. Allez-y, il n'y a pas de problème.
Comme ça, donc, le temps qu'on regarde les questions.
Parfait, il n'y a pas de souci. Donc, je vais choisir. On ne pourra pas répondre à toutes les questions, il y en a tellement, mais je vais sélectionner celles qui sont vraiment pertinentes pour le thème.
D'accord.
Et que moi, on pourra répondre sans problème.
Merci beaucoup. Madame Hanan Khalqi. Madame Khalqi.
Activez votre micro.
Ou Madame Sarah Ibrahimi, je ne sais plus.
Hello, everybody. This is Sarah Ibrahimi. I can go ahead if it's possible.
Yeah, sure. Please.
Yes.
Juste avant que vous commenciez, il n'est pas interdit de poser des questions en français pour que tout le monde, parce que Frédéric comprend très bien le français, il pourra répondre en anglais.
I think Sarah is fluent. If I have a good memory, Sarah is from University Al Khawain, isn't it? And
yes.
you are fluent in English, so that's
Je peux la poser en français, mais je préfère la poser en anglais si ça vous dérange absolument.
Il n'y a pas de problème, non, pas de problème.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you everyone for your efforts. As I said the first time, I really appreciate being part of this series of productive webinars and workshops. Dr. Frederick, thank you so much for a productive, insightful presentation. Actually, you brought a lot that I learned from. Now I have two questions. One seems a little bit complicated to me, is the copyright. So you mentioned that there is a period for copyright. Now, if copyright lasts for a certain period of time, once that copyright product, whether it's a book or an artistic product, passes to public domain, and we use it between that timeline between the time it passes to public domain, are we still do we still have to mention the owner of the copyright, or we have the permission to just go ahead and use the material? That's my first question. My second question is concerning how can we have a perspective of, especially for researcher. Now I'm hoping I can complete my PhD research soon, but I have a question about when you do an exhaustive literary review and you have access to all the books you've read to answer your question or your thesis question or your hypothesis, and then all of a sudden you come up with an idea, you think that you are the owner, between quote, or the creator of that idea, and then you go ahead and you contribute to that idea, and when you use it, you claim you are the owner of that idea, and then happens to be down the road that idea has been mentioned or has been used somewhere else. Does that mean we are by any way transgressing the dishonesty or plagiarism guidelines? That's my second question. Thank you all. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's true that I am an English teacher, but I've been following you guys through all the workshops. I truly appreciate it. Thank you all.
Merci beaucoup. Alors, je propose avant de répondre à votre question, d'ajouter des questions qui vont dans le même sens, qui ont été posées sur le forum, la conversation du groupe. Alors, je prends des questions et puis Frédéric, tu peux répondre et je le ferai aussi. Alors, il y a une question de Ahmed Houaria qui moi, je vais traduire donc, pour que tout le monde puisse comprendre. Modifier du matériel d'enseignement d'origine peut changer le contenu ou l'esprit du contenu initial. Est-ce qu'il serait plus approprié que cette initiative soit sujette à l'autorisation ou l'accord de l'auteur? Nous avons également une question au sujet du REL, de Creative Commons. how to avoid plagiarism, comment éviter le plagiat et combien, parce que c'est ce genre de question qui est posée généralement par les chercheurs et les doctorants, comment éviter le plagiat, combien de phrases peut-on utiliser d'un même auteur, par exemple une phrase par auteur, ou bien peut-on la reformuler et mentionner en même temps l'auteur en note de bas de page. Je regarde d'autres questions rapidement.
Can we maybe start with these questions already?
Vas-y,
before
vas-y.
we forget them?
Ok, tu peux répondre à ces questions
Okay.
et puis je vais poser d'autres.
Okay, so I think the first question was about when do you need to mention the name when copyright is still valid, and then afterwards when the work is in public domain. So I was always thinking, okay, once it's in public domain, you don't need to mention the name anymore. But then I was reading the law from Morocco, and there I see that the moral rights are eternally valid, and the moral rights include the right for having your name mentioned, the paternity, you can claim to be the father or the mother of the work. So now I changed my mind. So maybe even in public domain, you still need to mention the name. It's not too difficult to mention the name. Maybe sometimes it's difficult. Can I mention the name on the same slide? Or no, it's rather easy to put it at the end of the slides or the end of the movie, the credits and so on. So I think it's safe now to always mention the name of works you are reusing. And when copyright is still valid, it's a requirement, unless, of course, the author says, okay, the work is in CC0 or public domain today already, and you don't need to mention my name. But so I think it's safe to also always mention the name. And then, of course, yes, this is related, but not the same with ideas about plagiarism. So on the one hand, you have the laws, and on the other hand, you have the tradition in academia. So academics, universities, they find themselves on top of the law what they consider fair and not fair. So some things can be legally allowed, but not fair. For example, legally, you can be inspired by ideas and by others and write about these ideas, but in universities, we don't find it fair that you are basing yourself on ideas without mentioning where you found these ideas. So you can, of course, be in an honest moment that you think that the idea is yours, that you invented the idea, while later you discover, oh, I was not the first, actually somebody was before me. So you were not dishonest, but now that you know it, you could be dishonest. You have to change maybe your text and include a new source. If your PhD is not finally published yet, it's time to update it. Then about how many phrases can you cite? There is not really a legal rule. They talk about short extracts, okay, in most of the countries. But in universities, the tradition is you don't copy a sentence, you don't copy half a sentence without making clear that you copy it and putting quotation signs around it and mentioning the source. You can rephrase, but if you got the ID from somewhere, in universities, it's a tradition to then mention the source of your rephrased sentence or rephrased ID. I'm saying universities in general. Maybe there's another tradition in some countries, I don't know. But to be safe, better give references to sources. Then there was a question about, yes, what about if you change the spirit of a work? Should you then maybe mention this or be careful? Yes, that's a difficult issue because there are the moral rights, and also in Belgium, I think in Europe, we cannot take a distance over moral rights. You know, there's a funny story in Belgium this week. I want to say sorry for the bad things that the former Belgians have done in Africa, especially in Congo. Many people in Belgium feel very bad about this nowadays, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement and the police violence in the news. So we have a lot of old statues in Belgium from a former King Leopold II, who did some brutal things in Congo, not really himself, but people for him. And now we have troubles with these statues. We don't like them, many people don't like them anymore. So we are throwing red paint on them. We are lobbying to remove them or to add some text about it to put it in a better context. And now, yesterday, we had somebody, a legal expert, I think, saying, yeah, don't forget the moral rights of the people that have made these statues. You cannot remove the statues and you cannot change the statues because that's against the moral right of the inheritance of the sculptures. If the sculpture is not 70 years yet, you cannot change it. Well, I call this copyright maximalist, you know. If we cannot change or reduce or remove a work from the public square, that's going too far. So yes, okay, don't change a work and then mention the name and make it so seemingly that the person had another ID than one was the real ID. That's the idea of, in the copyright laws, the author rights, the moral rights, the integrity. You should not be put in a bad daylight for your work. Imagine that I create a work defending Africans, and then somebody is changing my text to attack Africans. This is against my moral desire. So I have the legal right to refuse this. That's true. So, but you see conflicts arise there. Sorry, maybe for the long answer. Okay. Have I most? And then plagiarism. Plagiarism is a very big topic, but yes, like I said, it's more an academic definition than a legal definition. It's a little bit stricter than the legal requirements in most of the country. And how to avoid it? Well, first of all, many people don't know that everything that is published is copyrighted by default, and many people think, oh, what I find on internet, I can copy it because it is on internet. No, you can only copy it if the author has given permission, so with a free license, for example. So it's not necessary, but it doesn't hurt to mention explicitly the license or just the copyright. If you just want to copyright something strictly, the C copyright, all rights reserved by Frederick, it's not necessary, but it's useful to avoid plagiarism by people that don't know it. Okay, but then how to avoid that your students are doing plagiarism? Well, sometimes I'm giving presentations on this. Maybe you find on my slideshare. If I didn't forget to publish it, it's probably there somewhere. For me, it's important to do prevention and training about it before you do detection and punishment. Many students come in your university and don't know all the details about what do we consider plagiarism and whatnot. So teach them about this, teach them why we want references and citations, why this is useful, for example, to follow an argumentation, to find works and to find more details and so on. Give them maybe extra scores for a good reference list. Ask draft versions of their essays. If you only ask the final version, it's much harder to detect plagiarism. Detecting you can do with tools, but the tools are bad. because the tools are easy to avoid. When the student knows the plagiarism tools, they're going to go back to the library, nice, and they take a book, which is not in the online database of anti-plagiarism tools, and they may be translated, and the tools don't see the translations, and so on and so on and so on. So it's training and giving examples. So in your teaching material, put more references. So I, for example, have in my presentation today credits and a slide with additional credits. I'm not too happy. If I had more time, I would have included maybe more citations of documents and rather scientific articles. I do this often for other presentations. So yes, we need to give examples to students.
Ok, merci Frédéric. J'ajouterai simplement sur cet aspect du plagiat, enfin du plagiat en français, on parle de plagiat, c'est que c'est une question essentiellement une question éthique. Avant que ce soit une question académique, c'est aussi une question d'éthique. C'est le respect, c'est comme si vous rentrez dans un supermarché et que vous voliez des marchandises ou des items sans les payer. Donc, si vous citez, vous utilisez la production intellectuelle de quelqu'un sans le citer, sans donner la référence, c'est du vol. Donc, c'est une question d'éthique. Alors, en parlant de cela, je vois une question pour qu'on dise qu'on fait de la discrimination. Monsieur Abdelrahman Merzouk qui a posé la question suivante. Bon, on va répondre. Alors, il dit, je ne crois pas que le conférencier ait de mauvaises intentions en débutant son parcours historique concernant l'édition et les publications à la fin du XVe siècle. Je lui suggère d'approfondir cet aspect historique en relation avec le droit d'auteur et que le vol et la triche ont pris naissance cette époque avec la Reconquista et l'Inquisition qui se sont basés sur le fait de s'accaparer toutes les œuvres et manuscrits arabes, bon, arabes musulmans, on va dire, c'est beaucoup plus général, et les traduire en s'attribuant l'autorité essentiellement en médecine, pharmacologie, etc. etc. Bon, c'est une question qui revient assez souvent. Bon, l'héritage de la connaissance humaine est un héritage universel. Si les musulmans d'Andalousie ont développé les sciences, la médecine, la philosophie, ils ne l'ont pas fait ex nihilo, c'est-à-dire qu'ils se sont basés également sur ce qu'ont fait les Grecs, ce qu'ont fait les Hindous, ce qu'ont fait les Chinois, etc. Ça veut dire que la science humaine est un renouvellement continuel. C'est vrai, en ce temps, on n'en parlait pas encore des droits d'auteur, mais il était naturel de citer généralement, et je crois que les noms d'Avicenne ou bien Averroès sont toujours cités dans la tradition occidentale. N'est-ce pas, Frédéric? Est-ce que tu as quelque chose à ajouter?
Yes, thank you very much for this remark. I appreciate it very much. So, yes, I need to say sorry for giving you a European perspective mainly. And I told you, I'm aware that there are many black spots in the history and that history is written by winners. And yes, it's nice that you are sharing some aspects from your region so that I can indeed go and look up and maybe add it in the future. I'm certainly aware that I have still some blind spots, but I also have some blind spots less than what I typically see, because I see even in legal education, in law education, I'm mainly frustrated with them so often teaching the history of copyright as it's all about economics and money. And I think, no, we should say, first of all, it's for education. We want useful work for education and science. Okay.
Bien, alors, c'est Kamal, est-ce qu'on ajoute encore des questions à partir de la conversation ou bien
Je pense que c'est bien de donner d'écouter les gens.
Voilà, je pense que c'est. Alors, si quelqu'un veut poser une question, il est bienvenu. On vous écoute.
Voilà, on peut intervenir?
Oui. Allez-y. Allez-y.
Voilà, donc, bonjour tout le monde. Je remercie Monsieur Frédéric.
S'il vous plaît, dites votre nom et votre institution.
Je remercie Monsieur Macari pour son c'est-à-dire sur le projet. Et un point qui est très important c'est en ce qui concerne les ressources pédagogiques. Donc, pour les ressources pédagogiques, donc il y a donc on voit déjà le suffixe pédagogique. Donc là, ça nécessite des conditions et des compétences essentiellement pédagogiques, didactiques et technologiques même. Et là, dans la plupart des cas, les ressources pédagogiques, ce n'est pas, c'est-à-dire, donc ça peut être un chercheur qui est excellent, mais de point de vue production des ressources, ça devient très difficile pour lui. Donc là, c'est pas, et la raison pour laquelle je dis ceci, la formation à distance, il a montré que, moi, je peux dire que la plupart des ressources pédagogiques, essentiellement scientifiques, donc ce n'était pas au niveau. Et il a montré qu'il y a des lacunes pédagogiques et des lacunes didactiques dans la production de ces cours-là, etc. Et lorsque je parle également de ressources pédagogiques, le cours, normalement, ça va refléter une séquence pédagogique. Je préfère mieux de parler de support pédagogique. Et un support pédagogique, ça demande tout un travail donc, pour le produire. C'est-à-dire, je peux prendre un savoir et je peux le transformer, donc un savoir savant en savoir qui est enseigné. Et ça, c'est un point qui est très important. Ce n'est pas n'importe qui va le faire. Si on ne connaît pas la transposition didactique, là, ça va poser des problèmes pour celui qui va faire la production de ressources. Donc, de là, je tire donc un point qui est très important. Pour produire des ressources pédagogiques, il faut former les gens. Former les gens didactiquement et pédagogiquement et dans les TIS, c'est-à-dire les technologies d'information et de communication. Sinon, ça ne marche pas. Sinon, on va voir que donc, les résultats, d'ailleurs, on l'a vu dans la formation à distance, l'enseignement à distance, il y a des choses qui normalement, ça ne devait pas être un modèle de production. Et là, si on veut partager, nous devons partager quelque chose de bien. Et sinon, c'est comme si on va, poser des problèmes même. C'est-à-dire, il y a des gens, par exemple des enseignants, qui vont voir ces ressources, ils vont les prendre. Et voilà, ça va poser des problèmes donc, pédagogiquement. Donc, de là, on conseille que, c'est-à-dire celui qui va produire, donc, il devait avoir des compétences, et des compétences pédagogiques, didactiques, etc. Et je pose une question à M. Macari, s'il vous plaît. Est-ce que lors de votre projet, c'est-à-dire le staff, est-ce qu'il y avait des membres des écoles normales supérieures? Parce que d'après ce que je sais, les compétences pédagogiques, il y en a assez dans les écoles normales supérieures. Donc, avec les universités, ça commence la pédagogie. Et parfois, on prononce le terme pédagogie, didactique, etc., mais on est très loin. Donc là, je ne sais pas, est-ce qu'il y avait, c'est-à-dire le staff, il a été complété par des enseignants des écoles normales supérieures. Et pour terminer, je remercie tout le monde. Vraiment, il nous a donné l'occasion d'entendre le projet Erasmus. Donc, c'est très, très intéressant donc, ce que vous avez fait dans ce projet-là. Donc, c'est très, très bien. Et ça nous a donné l'occasion de voir ce projet en détail. Parce que moi, je ne sais pas présenter. Je m'appelle M. Mahouni Abdelfatah, enseignant-chercheur et agrégé en sciences de la vie et de la terre, donc à l'École normale supérieure de Tétouan, Université Al-Maqsad. Et merci.
Merci, c'est Mahouni, merci beaucoup. C'est vrai, on veut pas entrer maintenant dans la dimension. Ce que vous dites, je suis tout à fait d'accord. C'est-à-dire que la Covid-19 nous a montré quand même plusieurs aspects de ce qu'on appelle l'enseignement en ligne ou l'enseignement à distance. Mais nous, ce qui nous intéresse dans ce webinaire, c'est surtout pas les supports pédagogiques ou les productions pédagogiques, mais surtout les ressources éducatives libres, qui peuvent être pédagogiques ou non pédagogiques, qui peuvent être également des ressources pour la recherche, également les développements, etc. Donc, si on rentre dans ce qui a été, ce qu'on a vu, etc., tout ce qui a été produit n'est pas nécessairement quelque chose de qualité. Et je voudrais juste ajouter à ce que vous avez dit que il n'y a pas que les écoles normales supérieures où il y a la pédagogie, il y a dans les universités également moi, je suis enseignant-chercheur, mais j'ai aussi un diplôme supérieur en technologie éducative et en pédagogie numérique. Donc, ce n'est pas l'apanage mais bien sûr, il y a des personnes très compétentes dans les écoles normales supérieures, les CMRF, etc. Oui, dans le projet, nous avions parce que c'était un projet essentiellement pour les universités. Donc, quand j'ai dit université, les écoles normales supérieures font également partie de l'université. Mais il y avait un public de différents pays, de Palestine, de l'Égypte, de l'Espagne et de l'Italie, où il y a également des spécialistes en éducation et en pédagogie. Donc, le projet a regroupé. Mais ce que je regrette, merci beaucoup pour les mots gentils que vous aviez dit. Nous avons fait notre possible pour faire connaître ce projet, mais malheureusement, il n'y avait pas d'intérêt. Les gens ne s'intéressaient pas. Comme aujourd'hui, maintenant, tout le monde parle de l'enseignement à distance après la pandémie. Il y en a même qui, en 3 mois, sont devenus des spécialistes qui donnent des conférences sur le e-learning, l'enseignement à distance. Malheureusement, ça, c'est l'apanage des pays sous-développés. C'est-à-dire, on n'écoute pas les gens du domaine, les spécialistes, et chacun commence à parler. Bien sûr, le projet, il a eu un impact, peut-être pas au Maroc, nous espérons avec la pandémie qu'il aura plus. Je vous ai donné le site web du projet, vous avez tout ce qu'il faut. Hein. Il y a les ressources, il y a les descriptions, il y a le cours en ligne qui est gratuit, ouvert, etc. Donc, je vous rejoins sur certains points, mais ici, on parle surtout des ressources éducatives libres et non pas des supports pédagogiques dans le sens, on va dire, scolaire ou académique du terme.
Est-ce que je peux juste permettre de dire qu'on a juste 5 minutes pour clôturer l'atelier, malheureusement. Donc, voilà.
Alors, si quelqu'un a une question pour ne pas s'accaparer la parole au professeur Questier.
On a Madame Nora, je pense, qui a la parole. Madame Nora.
Prendre deux questions et on arrête.
Good afternoon. I'm Nora Hudaigui, a professor in business law. Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Frédéric Guestier. I have 2 questions about your presentation. First, I want to say you develop your presentation in the direction of copyright, creation of teachers, essentially teachers, but you don't speak about creation of students, like free software, software about serious game, and what is copyleft, what is GNU GPL. So it's important to make difference or no. And in second, you say it's very expensive to create an open specific software, freedom. And do you think that it's important that public, it's to say that it's a public good, education is a public good, and state must participate to subvention, to public fund to develop the open resources for education? Thank you very much.
Yes.
Merci beaucoup. À toi, Frédéric.
Yes, very good questions and very good remarks. Of course, I was limited by time. Otherwise, I could indeed have shared lots of things about the things you mentioned. Yes, it's important also to let the students be creators. It's not only the teachers, and it's not only the content. I say content is no longer king. It's very nice, especially for bachelor students, to have good teaching materials. But for students higher up, like last year master students, they are almost in their profession. So you should evolve towards them being creators, them searching knowledge, them searching materials. So what I do with my future students, or what I did my future students, is, for example, ask them to create learning materials with the free license to publish it, for example, on Wikipedia or Wikiversity or on Wikibooks, which specializes in creating books for education. And then, yes, copyleft. There was another question also about it. You could consider the reverse of copyright, even the symbol. They mirror the symbol so that the C turns around, copyleft. But it's also having a specific definition. And then it's similar to the share alike of Creative Commons. So copyleft software licenses ask that the license stays the same if you modify the software. And this means, this has the result that that kind of copyleft software has become much more popular. The GPL license, the GNU GPL license software, much more popular than other free licenses for software like the BSD license, which is not really copyleft. You can modify it and then keep your modifications secret. So then companies like Microsoft and Apple take free software, modify it, and keep their modifications secret. There was another question about free and open source software. What's the difference between free and open source? It's almost the same. Most of the open source software is free, but it's more about philosophy. So the free software emphasizes the freedoms, while the open source is more like, for example, by engineers. They like it to be practical, open. Then your second question is about, yes, I agree very much. The state should promote the development of free materials. I forgot to give the example of half of my country, Flanders. The government understood that it's better to support financially an organization which was already quite popular in Flanders, helping teachers sharing their materials. So I should have included this one, classement, you could say almost in French, is a website with, I think, more than 60,000 or 100,000 teachers who share their teaching materials. And our government said, okay, instead of sending money to publishers, we send money to this organization to do quality control. So teachers can upload the materials, but then people funded by the government are checking, is this good quality? Yes, then we share it with everybody. If not, we say, okay, can you improve a bit? They have even a system of credits, of scores. You answer a few questions like, I'm teaching French, I'm teaching mathematics. The system knows what to show you. You get starting credits, and every time you download, it costs you credits. When your credits are finished, it asks you to share something again, or to share for the first time something. But to avoid trash being uploaded, they have that quality control. So, yes, I like that concept of the state saying, okay, there's a maximum price that the school can ask for learning materials. We have in Flanders the maximum bill for, I think, primary and secondary education. So everything together, school costs, learning materials, cannot go above a certain limit. And then, of course, open educational resources are helping. I hope this answers most of your questions.
Merci beaucoup, Frédéric. On va prendre une dernière question dans l'auditoire, si quelqu'un veut intervenir avant de clôturer le webinaire.
Oui, on a Madame Latifa Bouazaoui.
Merci, M. Hatim. Bonjour tout le monde. Bonjour tout le monde. Merci, merci quand même de me donner une minute pour dire ma question. Je remercie d'abord les intervenants pour la qualité de leurs interventions. J'avoue que j'ai beaucoup appris avec vous deux. Merci infiniment. J'ai juste une petite question à M. Kelly, si vous permettez. C'est juste concernant le feedback de votre expérience d'OpenMed. Quel est le feedback que vous avez eu des utilisateurs du projet?
Merci beaucoup. Oui, le feedback, c'est-à-dire, il y a tout d'abord les étudiants ou les doctorants, parce qu'il n'y avait pas que des enseignants dans la formation que nous avons organisée, que ce soit à Turin ou bien online. Beaucoup de gens ont apprécié. Il y a beaucoup de gens qui ne savaient pas qu'il existait des ressources éducatives libres. Beaucoup de gens ne savaient pas comment rendre leurs ressources libres. Beaucoup de gens ne savaient pas comment, par exemple, je peux créer un cours en ligne et en même temps le rendre libre, c'est-à-dire sous licence créative. Je peux dire que le feedback était très, très positif, mais malheureusement, je le répète toujours, c'est très limité. Uniquement les gens qui sont, j'allais dire, curieux, il y a une curiosité intellectuelle pour apprendre. Mais la majorité ne se sent pas concernée. C'est pour ça que j'ai dit tout à l'heure, j'espère qu'avec cette crise de coronavirus, on va se rendre compte non seulement de l'importance de l'enseignement à distance, des ressources numériques, mais également de cet aspect de l'éducation ouverte, open education, mais également les OER, les ressources éducatives libres, parce que c'est une clé pour le développement de la recherche scientifique. On se plaint toujours que la recherche scientifique n'avance pas chez nous, etc. Mais tant que c'est verrouillé, que c'est payant, les gens ne peuvent pas avoir accès à la connaissance d'une façon aisée. Donc, je ne peux pas vous dire que je suis satisfait à 100%, mais pour les gens qui s'intéressent au domaine, je crois que nous avons fait, avec le projet OpenMed, une grande avancée, ne serait-ce que la déclaration du Maroc, qui est malheureusement connue dans le monde entier, mais n'est pas connue au Maroc. Donc, nous espérons que les jeunes générations de chercheurs, d'enseignants vont prendre la relève pour pouvoir renforcer, comme a expliqué Frédéric, que ce soit une politique de l'État et non pas seulement des initiatives d'une telle ou telle université ou d'un tel ou tel projet. Voilà donc ce que je crois qu'on va arrêter. Merci beaucoup, professeur Questier, pour son implication. Nous continuons à travailler d'ailleurs dans le projet Marmouk. Et merci beaucoup à Erasmus+, qui nous a donné cette chance, l'université de Mohamed Cheikh Saidi à Tétouan, et Sikamar Klaoui et tout le staff technique. Merci beaucoup aux participants pour vos questions pertinentes. Malheureusement, nous n'avons pas pu répondre à toutes les questions, mais nous apprécions beaucoup votre implication et votre intérêt. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. Merci, M. Makali. Merci, Hatim. Merci beaucoup à tous les participants. Nous allons faire comme d'habitude, peut-être par la suite, faire un retour sur les questions qui sont restées en suspens. Merci à tous. N'oubliez pas que demain, nous avons un rendez-vous le matin pour l'atelier 5, le Gémeaux numérique du campus. On va découvrir ce que c'est. Moi non plus, je ne sais pas exactement ce que c'est, donc ce sera la grande découverte. Et puis l'après-midi, travaux pratiques, virtuels et distants. C'est le retour du projet Express, cofinancé dans le cadre d'Erasmus+, ainsi qu'un autre projet aussi, eLives, Erasmus. Donc, je vous remercie encore une fois. Merci à toute l'équipe. Merci Hatim. Merci encore M. Makali d'avoir accepté de modérer cette session. Thank you so much, Frederick, for your sharing. We will send you some of the comments that we received over the session.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Sorry for my connection.
Merci, Frédéric.
Merci, you're welcome. I hope to be soon back in Morocco.
You are welcome.
chat